Conference started this morning, in fact. What are some of the main issues discussed so far?
We spent quite a bit of time discussing governance weaknesses in the fisheries sector, which obviously partly contributed to fish rot. So a lot of secrecy, failure to reform the Marine Resources Act over a number of years now, and which all are raising fears that fish rot is not the only corruption scandal in the fisheries sector. And then we moved on to public procurement, been looking at the law and the way in which it's implemented, and the fact that quite a lot of the offices, ministries and agencies of government do not implement the laws that it's supposed to be, particularly in terms of publishing information about procurement awards and so on. So this afternoon we'll go and look at oil and gas issues more closely. Obviously, we just discovered quite significant offshore oil in the south of Namibia, so it's a very relevant discussion to be discussing our laws and policies and whether they're up to speed and whether they can prevent us falling into the traditional stereotypical trap of corruption that other oil states in Africa in particular have gone through.
Right. Now, do you think enough is being done, Mr. Hopwood, in order to combat corruption? And if not, what more can be done? You've mentioned quite a number of, issues earlier on, and those issues being fish rot, public procurement, oil and gas. But what more can be done to combat corruption in our country?
Well, just on the legal policy front, all our laws in those sectors are seriously deficient, and they need to be reformed with some urgency and new systems of transparency and accountability introduced. Another issue is that we have sometimes good laws, but we don't implement them. So we have the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Witness Protection Act, but after 5 years of being passed by Parliament, there's still no implementation taking place. So implementation, reform of the laws, they both require political will from the top, and that's what's lacking at the moment, I'm afraid. So until we can get government to show more seriousness, and we've been trying to say some of these objectives, particularly in reforming extractive sector law, are in the Harambe 2 plan. They're also in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy Plan. And these are official documents that state that we need to do these things within the next 2 years.
Right.
So we hope that we can also alert the policymakers and decision makers and the politicians that they need to get moving on these things.
So why do you think there are still some delays in some of the corruption cases in the country?
Well, corruption cases is a slightly different thing. That's to do with the court system. Obviously, we know that our court system is very slow. That's partly because it allows for lots of appeals to Supreme Court. The way that the fish rot trial has gone is that people have brought bail applications quite late. They're now objecting to the trial judge. All these things delay the cases. So there's a combination of factors as to why cases are being delayed, but I think it's overall not good. Obviously, the chances of evidence eroding over time, witnesses falling ill or dying or moving away becomes greater the longer these cases are dragged out.
Right. And finally, just in brief, Mr. Hopwood, to what extent can corruption damage a country's image and hinder development? Just very briefly before we end this interview.
Well, the theme of the International Anti-Corruption Day, which is on Friday, is that, the corruption affects peace and security and development. And it undermines the future of a country in that way. And if we allow corruption to develop and take over our society, ultimately we will be a failed state. So it's important to take action now before things are too bad. But we know things are going in the wrong direction, so we really have to reverse that direction and make things better in the short term, not just the medium term.
Mr. Hopwood, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. And that was Mr. Graham Hopwood, IPPR's Executive Director, talking to us.